In this episode, we're going to make hashing feel like a straightforward integrity tool rather than a confusing cousin of encryption, because beginners often mix the two up, and that confusion creates bad security decisions. Hashing is not about hiding information from people, and it is not about being able to reverse something back to the original. Hashing is about creating a compact fingerprint of data so you can tell whether it changed. That sounds simple, but there are many ways to use hashing incorrectly, and there are also many situations where hashing is the right answer even when encryption is not. Leaders need to understand hashing because it shows up everywhere: verifying files, detecting tampering, storing passwords safely, and supporting digital signatures. If you can explain what hashing does, what it does not do, and how it fits into integrity checks, you become much better at evaluating security claims and making trust decisions based on evidence rather than on buzzwords. A cryptographic hash function takes input data of any size and produces a fixed size output called a digest. The digest is designed to be deterministic, meaning the same input always produces the same digest, and it is designed to change drastically if the input changes even slightly. A single flipped bit in the input should produce a very different digest, which is why hashes are useful for detecting subtle tampering. Another important design goal is that the hash should be one-way in practice, meaning you cannot take the digest and recover the original input. That one-way property is why hashing is different from encryption. Encryption is meant to be reversible with a key, while hashing is meant to be irreversible. Leaders should be careful with language here, because people sometimes say they hashed data when they really mean they encrypted it, or they say they encrypted data when they really mean they hashed it. The correct term matters because it tells you what the system can and cannot do. The most basic integrity check with hashing works like this. You compute the digest of a file or message at a trusted time, store that digest somewhere safe, and later recompute the digest and compare. If the digests match, the data is unchanged. If they differ, the data has changed. This is tamper detection because the hash does not prevent modification, but it makes modification visible. The key is that the stored reference digest must be protected, because if an attacker can change both the file and the stored digest, they can hide their tampering. Beginners sometimes imagine that hashing alone automatically guarantees integrity, but integrity only holds if the reference value is trusted. Leaders should therefore ask where the reference digests live, who can modify them, and how changes are monitored. A hashing integrity check is only as strong as the trust you place in the comparison point. This trust issue is why hashing often appears in combination with other controls, like digital signatures or secure distribution channels. If a file's digest is published on the same untrusted site as the file itself, an attacker who compromises the site can replace both, and the hash comparison becomes meaningless. If the digest is signed using a digital signature, then recipients can verify the signature and trust the digest, assuming they trust the signing key. This is a common pattern in secure workflows: hash for compact representation, signature for trust in the hash. Leaders should recognize this pattern because it shows how cryptographic primitives are combined to meet real goals. Hashing provides the detection mechanism, and signatures or trusted channels provide the authority that makes the detection meaningful. When you can see the combination, you can evaluate whether a system has a real integrity guarantee or just a superficial checksum. It also helps to understand that not all hashes are used for security, and that can lead to dangerous misunderstandings. Some systems use simple checksums to detect accidental corruption, like a file getting damaged during transfer or storage. Checksums can be good for reliability, but they are not designed to resist malicious tampering. Cryptographic hashing is designed to resist attackers who try to craft changes that keep the same digest. Leaders should be careful when someone says a system checks integrity, because you should ask whether it uses a cryptographic hash or a non-cryptographic checksum. The difference matters because an attacker may be able to bypass a weak integrity mechanism with deliberate manipulation. A leadership mindset is to match the tool to the threat. If your threat includes a motivated attacker, you need cryptographic integrity, not just accidental error detection. Two important properties in cryptographic hashing are collision resistance and preimage resistance, and you do not need advanced math to understand what they mean. A collision is when two different inputs produce the same digest, which should be extremely difficult to find on purpose for a secure hash function. Collision resistance matters because if an attacker can create two different files with the same hash, they can trick systems that rely on hash comparisons. Preimage resistance is the idea that given a digest, it should be infeasible to find an input that produces it. That matters when hashes are used for things like password storage, because attackers may try to reverse engineer inputs that match known digests. Leaders should not treat these as academic buzzwords. They explain why some older hash functions are no longer considered safe for certain uses. If a hash function has known weaknesses that make collisions practical, then using it for integrity of signed documents or software distribution can be risky. The safe habit is to use well-regarded cryptographic hash functions that are considered collision-resistant and preimage-resistant for the intended use. Hashing also supports tamper detection in logs and records, which is a leadership-relevant topic because incident response depends on trustworthy evidence. One approach is to hash log entries or batches of logs so that later you can detect if someone altered them. A stronger approach is to create a chain of hashes where each entry includes the hash of the previous entry, so changes in one place ripple forward and become detectable. The important idea is that hashing can create tamper-evident structures, but again, only if the hashes and the chaining information are protected and monitored. If an attacker controls the system that generates and stores the hashes, they may be able to recompute the chain and hide alterations. This is why tamper detection is often paired with access controls, monitoring, and sometimes external storage or independent verification. Leaders should understand that hashing is a tool for evidence integrity, but it must be supported by governance and architecture choices that preserve trust. Another key concept is the difference between an unkeyed hash and a keyed integrity mechanism. A plain hash provides integrity checking in the sense of detecting changes relative to a trusted reference, but it does not prove who created the data. If you need integrity plus authenticity, you often use a keyed mechanism like a message authentication code, MAC, which requires a secret key. With AMAC, only those who have the key can create a valid value. So verification also provides evidence of authorization within the shared key group. Leaders should understand this distinction because many scenarios require knowing not just that data was not altered, but that it came from an authorized system. A plain hash cannot provide that by itself, because anyone can hash anything. The presence of a secret key changes the trust model, and that changes what claims you can safely make. Using the wrong mechanism can result in a system that detects accidental changes but cannot resist a deliberate attacker. It is also important to discuss how hashing is used incorrectly, because wrong usage often looks reasonable on the surface. One common misuse is using hashing to protect confidentiality, such as hashing sensitive data and assuming that makes it safe to share. Hashes are one way, but that does not always mean they hide the input, especially if the input space is small or predictable. For example, if a value comes from a limited set of possibilities, an attacker can compute hashes of all possible values and compare, effectively reversing the hash through guessing. Another misuse is trusting a hash value that is delivered through an untrusted channel, like receiving both a file and its digest from the same source without additional trust. A third misuse is using a broken or weak hash function for security purposes, which may allow collisions or other attacks. Leaders should treat these as patterns to watch for, because they reveal systems that are using cryptography as a label rather than as a carefully designed control. Hashing also appears inside other cryptographic mechanisms, and recognizing that can help you reason through exam questions. Digital signatures often sign a digest rather than the whole message, which means hashing is part of how signatures remain efficient and secure. Many authentication and secure communication protocols also use hashing internally for integrity checks, key derivation, or handshake verification. Key derivation is the process of generating key material from some input, often using hashing and other steps to produce keys with the right properties. Leaders do not need to implement key derivation functions, but they should recognize that hashing is foundational and that its correct selection and correct use can affect the safety of larger systems. When hashing is treated casually, it can undermine systems that appear robust on the surface. When hashing is treated carefully, it strengthens the integrity of many workflows at once. A useful leadership-level way to decide when hashing is the right tool is to focus on what claim you need to make. If the claim is that data has not changed, hashing plus a trusted reference or signature can support that. If the claim is that data came from an authorized source within a shared trust group, AMAC may be more appropriate. If the claim is that anyone should be able to verify content from a particular signer without sharing secrets, digital signatures are usually the right fit, and hashing will be part of that mechanism. If the claim is confidentiality, hashing is not the right tool because it does not hide data in a reversible way and can often be guessed if inputs are predictable. Leaders add value by forcing these claims to be explicit because cryptography choices become obvious when you clearly state what you need to prove. Many security failures happen because teams adopt a mechanism without stating the claim it is supposed to support. Hashing is powerful, but only when the claim and the trust model are correct. When you evaluate tamper detection designs, you should also consider what happens when tampering is detected, because detection without response is not a control. If a system detects that a file hash does not match, what does it do next? Does it stop the process, alert someone, fall back to a safe source, or log the event for investigation? Leaders should insist that integrity failures are treated as security-relevant events, not as minor errors to be ignored. This is especially true in scenarios like software updates, configuration files, or audit logs, where tampering can be a direct path to compromise. A mature approach includes clear handling rules and clear ownership of responses, because otherwise people will be tempted to override integrity checks to keep operations moving. That temptation is understandable, but it is also how attackers win. Hashing becomes meaningful when the organization is willing to enforce what the hash comparison is telling them. By the end of this episode, hashing should feel like a clean, precise concept. It creates a fixed fingerprint of data that allows you to detect changes, and it does so in a way that supports many security workflows. The main pitfalls are using hashing as if it provides secrecy, trusting hashes that come from untrusted channels, and relying on weak hash functions or weak reference protection. The main strengths are integrity checking, tamper detection, and serving as a building block for signatures and other trust mechanisms. Leaders who understand hashing can ask whether integrity claims are backed by a trustworthy reference and whether the system responds appropriately when integrity fails. That ability to connect the digest to a real trust decision is what turns hashing from a theoretical tool into a practical control. As we move into password storage next, keep this integrity mindset, because password hashing is one of the most common and most important places where hashing must be done correctly to survive real attacks.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.